Welcome to the Tim Booker channel, where wisdom is worth sharing. Wishing you a delightful listening experience. Today, the book I'm going to interpret for you is What Makes Love Last. How to Build Trust and Avoid Betrayal. I believe that making love last can be considered the fundamental question of intimate relationships because everyone yearns for love to be enduring and eternal. This is why we exchange sacred vows in front of our loved ones at weddings. It's our collective effort to uphold love through societal norms. This is why we are willing to invest in diamonds, as these precious stones symbolize our hopes and desires for eternity. However, love is often fragile, and a small betrayal can shatter the bonds of intimacy. Love is also elusive, often explained through feelings, as we come together because of them and part when they fade away. If this is the nature of love, then it seems that having enduring love relies solely on fate. But is this really the case? This book tells us it's time to change this perception. Love can not only be measured through scientific means but also studied through experiments. The author of this book, John Gottman, established his Love Lab in Seattle. After conducting scientific research on 700 couples, he discovered the secrets to making love last. During this process, he not only proposed groundbreaking theories but also created numerous scientific emotional measurement tools using mathematical models. These tools not only empower us to feel in control and certain in our relationships but also help us understand the intricacies of love. They enable us to pinpoint the small behaviors that can fracture love and, in turn, grasp the methods to repair intimate relationships. John Gottman is hailed as the marriage guru. He is a psychology professor at the University of Washington and the director of the Relationship Research Institute in Seattle. He is one of the most influential psychologists in the field of interpersonal relationships. Over his 40-year career in family relationship research, he has consistently worked on quantifying relationships and behavior, making predictions through mathematical modeling, and ultimately helping couples improve their patterns of interaction to achieve long-lasting, stable intimate relationships. This book is one of Gottman's 4 Horsemen of Intimate Relationships series and has been a bestseller on Amazon for 13 years. Next, we will join Gottman in his Love Lab to explore his unique discoveries about intimate relationships, understand how trust is eroded, and explore the occurrence of betrayal. Finally, we'll delve into Gottman's scientific methods for rebuilding trust and repairing relationships. Okay, let's begin with the first part and take a look at what Gottman discovered in his Love Lab. Gottman conducted a highly significant experiment that led to a redefinition of trust. He applied game theory to study the level of trust between partners. Game theory operates on a fundamental assumption that all parties involved are rational individuals seeking to maximize their own interests. Gottman's exploration of intimate relationships through game theory was based on this assumption, but he stumbled upon an intriguing phenomenon. Let's examine a case study first. A newlywed couple, Jenny and Al, approached Gottman seeking assistance with their household chores allocation issue. As rational individuals, they had 4 ways to handle housework: either both did it, they did it together, or either the husband or wife did it alone. Now, from a game theory perspective, which approach do you think aligns best with personal interests? Most people would likely choose to let the other person handle the chores, but is that the reality? Gottman had Jenny and Al complete a benefit sheet, rating the 4 choices on a scale of 0 to 10 in terms of benefits. I've included this benefit sheet in the text for your reference. The result was that both Jenny and Al found their individual benefits were maximized when they did the household chores together. Jenny scored 10 points, and Al scored 8 points. Notably, leaving all the chores to one person did not yield significant benefits for either of them. The underlying logic behind this experiment result was that the starting point for maximizing mutual interests shifted from oneself to the partner. For instance, for Al, doing household chores was not merely to avoid Jenny's nagging but because he understood that Jenny didn't want to become a homemaker, so he willingly shared the responsibilities. As a result, Gottman introduced a new definition of trust: I am willing to change my behavior for your benefit. For Jenny and Al, doing chores together not only kept their home clean but also nurtured trust and love for each other. Gottman's experiment provided empirical evidence for a common-sense notion: trust is of paramount importance in intimate relationships. Since trust is so crucial, can it be measured? If trust can be measured, can we then predict the course of a relationship? Measuring trust is not an easy task, but Gottman attempted it. In his Love Lab, he equipped visitors with various physiological sensors and connections. He then had them discuss specific disagreements for 15 minutes and observed their physiological responses, body language, facial expressions, and conversation. After the discussion, Gottman had the partners watch the recorded video separately and provide explicit feedback. For instance, if one partner made a commitment to do household chores, Gottman would ask the other partner, "Do you believe they can really do it, or do you think it's an empty promise?" He would then code these behaviors and feedback, categorizing, for example, furrowed brows or downturned mouths as negative. After observing hundreds of couples' interactions in this manner, Gottman created a universal trust measurement questionnaire. This questionnaire consists of 42 questions, such as whether you feel protected by your partner, whether you trust most people, and whether your partner provides emotional support. You can find this questionnaire at the end of the first chapter of this book, and I suggest you consider using it to evaluate the level of trust between you and your partner. Gottman identified the most common interaction patterns in trusting and crisis relationships and categorized them. To manage this data, he organized it into 3 boxes. The first one, called the positive box, collects positive emotions and behaviors such as humor, joy, and agreement. The second, known as the negative box, gathers negative emotions and behaviors like anger, sadness, and contempt. The remaining interactions, neither positive nor negative, go into the neutral box. Now, let's explore what interesting findings the author uncovered from these 3 boxes. It's entirely normal for couples to argue, even in healthy intimate relationships. Petty disagreements are bound to happen. Some visitors may appear extremely patient, but their physiological monitors betray them, indicating rising heart rates and blood pressure, suggesting they are on the brink of an outburst. During conflicts, people often lose their rationality, let alone efficiently address the issues. So, while it may seem impossible for anyone to enter the positive box during an argument, there are indeed some couples who can respond to each other calmly, lovingly, and with humor in a very short time. Let's take a look at a correct example, based on my personal experience. One day, I was in a car with a couple of friends, getting ready to go out for dinner. My friend's husband was driving, and as he merged onto the highway, he accelerated a bit too quickly, almost causing a minor collision with the car behind us. After a brief moment of silence in the car, my friend began to scold her husband relentlessly. Eventually, her husband, unable to tolerate it any longer, retorted, "Enough, with your driving skills, you have no right to criticize me." As tensions escalated, my friend suddenly changed her tone and said, "Forget it, if it weren't for the fact that you're tall and handsome, this would never end today." You see, this humorous twist, while not addressing the issue of dangerous driving, diffused the tension and saved everyone from the conflict's uncomfortable atmosphere. Therefore, repair is like a life jacket for intimate relationships. The effectiveness of repair determines the life or death of an intimate relationship. Happy couples, after intense arguments, can swiftly and precisely shift their negative emotions into the positive box. This ability is a sign of high trust between partners and a harbinger of a happy future. Now, let's explore what's in the neutral box. Don't assume that the term neutral implies dullness or lack of excitement. The author has discovered secrets within the neutral box that contribute to long-lasting relationships. Let's consider a real-life dilemma. When couples plan a trip, both partners often have their preferred destinations, especially when dealing with budget constraints. This issue can lead to sharp conflicts between partners who are usually polite and composed. I know couples who engage in an annual struggle over this issue. Faced with such intense conflicts, is there any way to avoid emotional outbursts, or are there no alternatives? Gottman observed that some couples manage to maintain composure during arguments. They do not require repair techniques, and it seems they don't even need repairs because they can remain calm while discussing their differences. This is not just appearing calm. Author discovered that their blood pressure and heart rate barely fluctuated during arguments. This rational approach helps reduce the noise and interference caused by emotional exchanges, even positive ones. According to a study of couples aged 45 to 60, long-lasting partners tend to become increasingly calm and rational when facing differences. If the term positive can be seen as a fire extinguisher for conflicts, then the term neutral serves as a safe harbor during conflicts. It allows partners to minimize emotional exchanges, including positive emotions, and focus on solving specific issues. Therefore, in Gottman's view, couples who benefit from the neutral term may have the deepest trust in each other. This trust prevents them from succumbing to emotional suspicion and anger, allowing them to work together to overcome difficulties. The results of this experiment also suggest that less emotionally reactive couples tend to grow old together. Of course, the group supporting this conclusion consists of couples aged 45 to 60, so benefiting from the neutral term may require time and adjustment. If you find it challenging to maintain a neutral state at the moment, don't worry. As long as you can transition to the positive or neutral term during arguments, it's a positive step for your relationship's future. Now that we've covered the neutral term, let's discuss the negative term. As the name suggests, there may not be any positive experiences within the negative term, but it can offer us some lessons. Any couple can potentially find themselves in the negative term because, despite the intimacy, each person is an independent individual, and consensus cannot always be reached. When in the negative term, couples often engage in self-centered monologues, which Gottman calls collective monologues. For example, the wife complains to the husband, "Why can't you do some housework?" The husband retaliates, "Why do you expect so much from me after a hard day's work?" The argument might conclude with one of them yelling, "Shut up." When couples enter the negative term, it signifies that at least one party has become hostile. This state is similar to drinking a strong hormone-modulating drink, leading to increased heart rate and blood pressure. It can be described in one word: uncontrollable anger. From an evolutionary perspective, this is an inheritance from our ancestors. When facing danger, it allowed us to either flee more quickly or retaliate more strongly. Next, the couple will either argue verbally, physically, or simply withdraw, which is known as stonewalling. For example, when one says, "Shut up," and the other stops responding, an invisible wall is erected between them. No message of love can pass through this wall. When couples enter this state, the repair methods from the positive box become ineffective. I'm sure many couples have experienced how difficult it is to calm the heated argument and try to reconcile when an argument reaches its boiling point. At such times, trying to use a hug to diffuse the situation might not end well. Therefore, Gottman concludes that the uncontrollable anger state is lethal to marital relationships. But why do only some couples fall into this vicious cycle? When repairs are ineffective and communication is impossible. The author provides a seemingly speculative answer, suggesting a lack of love. Communication for couples is not just about expressing opinions but also about craving and receiving understanding and respect from each other. In this sense, communication is not an instinctive expression but a communication skill. Therefore, a lack of communication prevents us from entering each other's inner worlds, leading to ineffective communication. This, in turn, further contributes to the breakdown of trust, which is the prelude to betrayal. So, how is trust eroded? Is betrayal foreseeable? Let's continue following Gottman's research to find answers. First, let's consider a question: do you think trust and mistrust, who is the cause, and who is the effect? Gottman's answer is that trust must be eroded first for betrayal to take hold. Building trust takes time, and so does its erosion. Gottman, through his studies, has drawn a roadmap for the occurrence of betrayal. With this map, we can recognize the small behaviors that can damage trust and correct them in time to prevent infidelity. The first step is the sliding door moment. We all desire to hear, "I love you," and crave affectionate hugs. These needs fundamentally represent invitations for communication, conveying, "I need you." Every time such an invitation arises, it's a sliding door moment. You can either open the door, respond to your partner's request, or close it and walk away. For example, one day, you're watching a documentary about Sydney tourism, and your husband happens to pass by and says, "I'd love to visit Sydney someday." At this moment, if you respond by saying, "I'd love to go there too, let's plan it," you've satisfied his emotional needs. But if you say, "Shoo, stop bothering me," or simply don't respond, you've undoubtedly closed the door to this need. Of course, it's impossible to respond to each other all the time, especially to minor emotional needs like pouring a cup of hot tea, getting a towel, or taking out the trash. While occasional neglect won't lead to a relationship abyss, prolonged neglect can make your partner doubt their importance. When you choose to turn away during these sliding door moments, conflicts start to escalate. If the neglecting party realizes their mistake and promptly repairs it, like acknowledging their poor attitude and planning the trip together, even a shaky start can be smoothed over. But if you fail to remedy the situation in time, it can become a regrettable event in your relationship, marking the second step in trust erosion. Once a regrettable event remains in your partner's memory, the third step of trust erosion, known as the Zeigarnik effect, comes into play. This concept, coined by psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik, explains that we remember unfinished tasks more clearly. For instance, in the past, you may have noticed that waitstaff at roadside eateries don't take notes but accurately fulfill your orders and even minor requests like no cilantro in the soup or less spiciness in the kebabs. This is the Zeigarnik effect at work. However, if you return after your meal and ask them what you ordered or requested, they probably won't remember. So, if your partner frequently brings up past issues, before rushing to rebut and criticize, consider whether these unresolved matters are at the root. We often know that when we argue with loved ones, it's essential to admit mistakes and make amends promptly, but we rarely think about why. The Zeigarnik effect tells us that timely communication and resolution lead to quick forgetting of arguments, leading to longer-lasting relationships. If old issues pile up between two people, trust further crumbles. They first become unreadable to each other and eventually turn into the most familiar strangers. This leads to the fourth step, falling into the trap of negative sentiment override. The concept of negative sentiment override, proposed by American psychologist Robert Weiss, suggests that under this mindset, partners easily interpret each other's everyday or even positive behaviors as negative. For example, when a couple reaches this point, if the husband prepares a lavish dinner for the wife one evening, she won't immediately feel happy but will instead think that something unusual is afoot. So when we can't help but view things from a negative perspective, we've likely fallen into the negative sentiment override trap. Unfortunately, once this mindset sets in, it becomes challenging to eliminate because sometimes the negative response is justified, while other times it's unfounded. The more negative sentiment override occurs between partners, the less effective their communication becomes, leading to four of the most negative communication patterns: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Gottman calls these patterns the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Just from this name, you can sense their destructive power. Once these communication patterns start between partners, they begin to feel that the other only cares about their own interests. This contradicts the trust we mentioned earlier, where we change our behavior for the other's benefit. When two people who love each other gradually turn into zero-sum players, they both end up losing love in the end. The disappearance of trust opens the door to betrayal. However, at this point, one final step remains before full-blown betrayal: negative comparison. For example, if you're already very dissatisfied with your partner, especially because of their high demands and temper, and you happen to meet someone who is calm, gentle, and understanding, you can't help but compare them. You might start to doubt your choice of partner and wish you could choose again. Do you see? At this stage, the occurrence of betrayal seems only a matter of time. When we analyze the route from trust erosion to the emergence of betrayal, you'll realize that the transition from a thriving to a declining intimate relationship isn't an overnight event. It's a long process during which we have many opportunities to repair our relationships. So, next, let's take a look at the marriage guru, Gottman, and see what effective ways he has to establish trust and avoid betrayal. I've summarized the relevant content from the book, and it boils down to two key aspects: psychological empathy and communication skills. Most psychological counseling and books will teach you to use communication to resolve differences. Gottman used to believe this as well, and in another work titled The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, he provided methods for improving marriages through communication. However, he later discovered that if troubled partners merely mechanically imitated correct expressions without truly understanding each other on a deep level, it couldn't resolve the fundamental issues between them. Therefore, in this book, he introduces an important concept: emotional attunement. So, what is emotional attunement? In the author's view, when partners can genuinely understand each other at a deeper level and express these understandings to each other in an affectionate manner, true intimacy is formed. This is emotional attunement. To put it simply, it's like the lyrics from a song by Sue Roy, sharing your sorrows when you're sad and rejoicing in your happiness. However, although this sounds simple, it's not easy to put into practice because each person's feelings vary. For example, if you've had a tough day at work and feel wronged, and you long for your partner's comfort, they might respond with something like, "Hey, that's no big deal, if you didn't do your job properly, you should be criticized." Or they might say, "Dear, don't be upset, let's think positively." The first response focuses on the facts, while the second tries to shift your emotions. Both responses ignore the most crucial aspect, which is acknowledging and understanding your feelings of being wronged. So, a better response would be, "You seem really upset, it looks like something bothered you. Would you like to talk to me about it?" Now, is there a way to enhance emotional attunement between partners? Yes, there is. Gottman provides us with practical exercises for daily practice. The first step is to express your true feelings as accurately as possible. Don't dismiss this as a cliché because many people seeking help from the author struggle to put their emotions into words. The second step is to ask open-ended questions. For instance, when you're chatting with your partner, don't ask, "Did you have a good day at work?" Instead, inquire, "How was your day at work? How did the new project progress?" Use more open-ended questions rather than multiple-choice ones. The third step is to deepen your connection. When your partner shares something with you, make an effort to provide empathetic feedback that shows you can relate to their feelings. This is essential for your partner to open up further. For example, if your partner shares a small achievement, no matter how insignificant it may seem to you, you should offer support and encouragement. The fourth step is to demonstrate your empathy. In romantic relationships, emotional support is needed more than detached analysis. If you must provide advice, make sure to do so after offering emotional support and soothing their feelings. Remember, understanding should precede advice. This is a fundamental principle in intimate relationships. When two people can deeply accept and understand each other, they establish the cornerstone of trust and can face life's challenges together. Now, what are some effective communication techniques during conflicts? Key to this is making conflict discussions constructive. How can you ensure that communication is not only effective but also constructive? Here are 5 highly actionable methods. 1. Before starting the discussion, recall recent positive moments between the two of you, such as cooking a meal together. This behavior can lower defenses, making it easier to engage in productive communication. 2. When initiating a discussion, make sure to center it around your own feelings. For example, if you want your partner to change a behavior, instead of starting with, "You're always playing games after work," try a different approach like, "When you're busy with games after work, I feel lonely because I'd like to talk to you. It makes me feel disconnected." 3. Stick to the issue at hand during the discussion, and avoid going off topic. For instance, address the topic directly, like, "Next time, please remember to recycle properly," rather than saying, "How many times do I have to tell you to recycle? Can't you remember?" 4. Pay attention to what might trigger your partner's emotions. Gottman shares his own example. He dislikes it when people tell him what he should do. Over time, you naturally learn each other's triggers. If you want to avoid escalating conflicts, steer clear of these danger zones. 5. Transform criticism into a request or a positive need. For example, change "stop ignoring me" to "I'd appreciate it if you could pay more attention to me." These suggestions might not sound groundbreaking, and you may find similar advice in books on relationships like The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work and The 7 Stages of a Loving Relationship. However, that's precisely the point. When an idea is repeatedly emphasized and recommended by many experts, it underscores its importance. The key afterward is to put this knowledge into practice. When couples incorporate these 5 suggestions into conflict discussions, problem-solving becomes much easier. More importantly, it deepens understanding and trust between partners, laying a solid foundation for a lasting and loving relationship. Alright, I've just finished decoding the main content of this book for you. Let's briefly summarize it. Gottman analyzed behavior and decisions in intimate relationships based on game theory assumptions. From this, he concluded that trust is the cornerstone of lasting love because it implies both partners are willing to change their behavior and decisions for each other. After observing hundreds of couples' interactions, the author found that those who could quickly and accurately transfer unpleasant emotions into the love bank were more likely to have a happy future. To maintain enduring love, partners should spend more time in the neutral zone. Prolonged periods of uncontrollable anger can inflict fatal damage on intimate relationships. Building trust takes time, and its erosion is not an overnight process. When we ignore our partner's emotional needs for months or even years, the protective wall that shields both individuals from external harm can become an insurmountable barrier between them. Once the wall becomes strong and trust is absent, infidelity and betrayal become possibilities. To repair such relationships, we must strive to accept and understand each other's feelings and learn to engage in constructive conflict discussions. Finally, I'd like to share a profound statement from the book that greatly resonated with me: entrusting a lifetime is a gradual process. While grand gestures of love are wonderful, the day-to-day effort to nurture a relationship is the most genuine reflection of life. Saying, "I love you," is a commitment that requires a lifetime of practice. When we look back on this experiment to make love last, we discover that there's a foundational cornerstone even more fundamental than trust. That cornerstone is sincerity. Only with sincerity can we continue the game of entrusting a lifetime. Without sincerity, no matter how effective the methods are, they cannot revive a dying relationship. So, how do we attain sincerity? Here's a phrase for you: there's no road to sincerity because sincerity itself is the road. Alright, that covers the essence of this book. Congratulations on finishing another book. Thank you for your support and attention. Please subscribe to the Tim Booker channel, like, and share with your family and friends. Wisdom deserves to be spread, paving the way for a better future. Thank you, and goodbye.